In any film project based on superheroes, good villains are needed because without them there would be no plot at all. No hero can save the world if there is no trouble in that place, and for that to happen, then there must be someone to cause it. This has always been very controversial in Power Rangers, as because it is a series for a children's audience, the villains could not be so dark and terrifying. Even when Lord Zed came to the franchise, he was a very dark and scary villain, and this caused many parents to start complaining. Apparently, Lord Zed was so dark that children were very scared and no longer wanted to watch the series. Because of situations like this, Power Rangers had to transform the villains into more comical beings so that they would not be so scary and basically adapt to a child audience. Obviously, this is perfect for the style that Power Rangers has had for these 30 years, but since the reboot is going to be aimed for a more adult audience, then this is not going to work anymore. The villains of the new universe must be very different for the whole series to work, and as I said in the beginning, a good plot works only when there is a good villain. The best example we can give is Thanos, which caused the Infinity War and Endgame movies to be spectacular. The success of these movies was never because of the superheroes. The full credit must be given to Thanos, as he was a spectacular villain, and his story made all the fans love him. For a villain to be spectacular, he must have some specific qualities and can't just be a terror-inducing monster. The best villains are always smart, calculating, and hard to understand. Within the Power Rangers franchise there have been very good villains, but because they can't give them the seriousness they deserve, those villains could not be part of the new universe with the new dark style. To start the entire theme of monsters and villains, they must establish a hierarchy. This means that the villains must have different levels of leadership, something that is going to help the entire story, as with this we will be able to see the power levels of each of them, and the Rangers will have to face a large evil army. In Power Rangers we saw a bit of this, but it was never well organized because each season had new Rangers, new villains, and everything was a bit confusing. As far as we know, Dark Spectre was like the leader of all the villains, but he really wasn't that powerful, and his leadership wasn't as good in the TV series as it has been in the comics. For this to be well organized, they must first create a villain who is the leader of all, a very powerful, intelligent, strategist, and who needs something special to conquer the universe. This search for that special thing that he needs is what is going to cause this villain to have soldiers to be able to do all that dirty work. This is the important part. Those soldiers must have certain levels so that everything is organized, and we can see something more planned. These are the secondary monsters, but they must be very powerful villains as well, since they are the ones that are going to have the battles with the Rangers, and for this reason, they cannot be simple ugly beasts. These monsters should have certain powers that endanger the planet, and each of them must have a different power. This has also happened in Power Rangers, but all those powers have been a bit silly, as that is the style. They had to give it so it can be a kid's show. In the reboot we should see awesome powers that cause real danger and not take away from the darkness of the situation. Another important thing about the villains is that they should be more powerful, and we should be able to see them for many episodes. This is something very important, since in every episode of Power Rangers we always saw the destruction of some monster, and sometimes they were excellent villains. All this wraps up the issue of repetitive episodes, as it is something that should have been removed from Power Rangers a long time ago, and we could see that in Cosmic Fury it worked very well. In this last season we didn't see episodes with the repetitive sequence, which is when a new monster arrives, confronts the Rangers, turns into a giant monster, and in the end the Rangers destroy it. This only causes us to not get to know this villain well, and can also bore us, since we know that at the end of the episode, they are going to destroy him. As I have said several times, This works perfectly for a children's show, but these are things that do not work in a show for adults, and that is why they must create excellent villains. Something very important about all these villains is their physique, since they have always been created with costumes made of different materials, which looked quite unreal and even a little funny. This is something that cannot happen in the reboot, and it will be very difficult to create all these monsters since they must use different techniques. Some villains can be created with makeup, just like they did in the 1995 movie, and this has been one of the best villains physically. All this makeup looks spectacular. Even the actor drank juice before each filming to change the color of his tongue. These techniques are a bit old, but they still work perfectly, and I think it's something they can still use. There are also monsters they can create with spectacular costumes, as they have done in movies like Aliens, which looked amazing. The other technique they can use is CGI, but this is something that costs quite a lot of money, and we don't know how much they are going to invest in these new projects. Each of these techniques has a big difficulty, and that is that in Power Rangers stories there are always hand-to-hand fights. For some funny reason, all the Power Rangers monsters know martial arts and were excellent masters of hand-to-hand combat because they could fight several Rangers at the same time. This is something quite unrealistic, and I think they could modify it in the reboot. This is why all these monsters should have different ways to attack the Rangers, and we wouldn't always have to see a martial arts fight. If we have some villain created with CGI, then it's going to be very complicated to create all these martial arts fights, but if these monsters only fight by throwing powers, then it might turn out better. The same goes for the monsters created with pure makeup, because if they can have a different style of attack, then they would have a little more freedom when creating the monster. So, for now we would have the villain leader of all, the secondary monsters that would also be very powerful, the weaker monsters that work to help the secondary ones, and only the soldiers that are always clones are missing. These are the soldiers that the Rangers always destroy easily and have never had the importance they deserve. Unfortunately, these monsters have never been created in the best way, as they always look terrible, and this is a serious mistake. Since they are the monsters we see most often, they should be created with more quality. This was done excellently in the 2017 movie, and these stone monsters are perfect. Write in the comments your opinion about how all the new villains of the reboot should be. Like this video and subscribe for more Power Rangers monsters.